Today is November 17th, 2023. We are interviewing Henri Goodheim. My name is Esther Finder. Mr. Goodheim is in Orlando, Florida. I am in Henderson, Nevada, in the United States, and the language will be English. Thank you for speaking with us today. What is your name, sir, and can you please spell it?
My name is Henri Max Goodheim, Goodheim. I was known as Max Henri Goodheim, Guthajm, at birth. That was a Polish name.
Could you spell Henri for us, please?
Henri was Henri.
Thank you. Can you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born in Paris, June 27, 1933, in Hospital Rothschild, where most of the Jews were born.
And how old are you today?
Well, from 33 to 23, 90 years old, 90 plus.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Ber, B-E-R, Goodheim. Also the same spelling when in France, and then he changed it to Goodheim, Goodheim, when he became a citizen in the United States.
And where was he originally from?
He was originally from Warsaw, Poland. He was born in 1900.
What do you know about your family's history in Poland?
Well, the only thing I know about my family is really the one that were in France and later in the United States. In Poland, I only know that my grandfather was a butcher, kosher butcher. My father had, I think, 3 brothers that which stayed in Poland, and a sister, which I never met. He had one brother that left Poland with him, who came to the United States, and I met later. But he had many cousins in the United States. As far as my mother...
Well, no, I want to stay with your father for just a minute, sir.
Okay.
When did your father leave Poland and why?
Well, my father left Poland I believe in the late 1920s or early 1930s. Why did he leave? He left with his brother because he was supposed to go to the army, to the Polish army. And Polish army was like 5 to 7 years. And of course, Jews were not well seen in the army. So he decided to just leave Poland.
And what work did he do in France?
In France, since he didn't speak any French, he was a waiter in one of my uncle's cafe restaurant that he had near Paris. He worked there for several years until, of course, the war.
And do you know what he did in Poland before he left?
No, I have no idea what he did in Poland. I guess probably worked with his father, but for some reason, all the question comes now. I wish I had all this question when he was alive.
Is there anything else you can share with us about your father that we should know?
Well, my father, like I say, that most of his family was in the United States. He came to the United States for a visit and liked it. He felt at home because he was in a Jewish neighborhood, Borough Park in Brooklyn. So he liked it, and when he came back to France, he'd ask me He said, Henri, go to the United States. If you like it, you stay and I come. If you don't like it, you come back and we stay in France. And that was the beginning of the story.
Okay, we'll get back to that in a minute. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Hanna Kosowska. Ooh, that's the spelling. K Kosowska, Kosov. Oh, that's the odd spelling. Kosowska. Hannah, Chana.
And what work did she do?
I really don't know what she was doing in Poland. I don't know. These are all, no, I cannot answer that.
Where was her family from?
My family?
Her family.
Her family.
Your mother's family.
Oh, also from Warsaw, Poland. That's where she met my father. Warsaw, Poland.
All right. Your parents met in Warsaw, but they didn't come together to Paris, did they?
They came together.
Oh.
They married in Poland. They were married in Poland and they came together.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
No, I don't have any brother and sister. I was the only child.
What languages were spoken in your home when you were a child?
Well, they spoke Polish, but I never picked up Polish. And the main language was Yiddish. So I spoke Yiddish. That was my first. Before I even spoke French, I spoke Yiddish with my father, family, friends there. That's what Yiddish.
Can you please share with us some of your earliest childhood memories of Paris?
I didn't get this.
Can you share what were some of your earliest memories from childhood in Paris?
Well, I must say, I was a happy child until the age of 7. Most of the time, because my father and mother were working, and my father was working in the restaurant, I stayed mostly in the restaurant with my aunt, and she had 2 teenage daughters. So, and then I went around the restaurant, play cards with the customers, and made a little money because I was winning, always winning, and bought myself some pastry. So that was a good time, I must say. I didn't go to school yet.
You were young. I realize you were very young, but did you have any understanding or awareness of what was happening in Germany at the time?
I personally, I was, like I said, 5, 6, 7 years old, didn't see anything. Didn't know anything. I'm sure my uncle or my father had some ideas because there were a lot of customers that came to his place, and they came from Poland, they came from Germany, they came from Czechoslovakia, all these countries. And I'm sure they told him some things, but I was too young to know what was going on.
How did things start to change in your life in the 1930s and then as the war started?
Well, what happened is that my uncle's restaurant was never closed. But one day I was sleeping by him and it was closed for some reason. Then I saw some people coming, like my mother, my father, my aunt and her children, and I was a little surprised, but then I realized we were leaving Paris. That's when I realized that we were leaving Paris. My uncle had a little station wagon. Where did he get it? I never saw it before, except for this day. So we all went into it. We were 11 people.
Can you tell us when this was?
What happened to the trip?
No, when? When did you get into this?
We left, it was the spring of 1940, I believe a month or so before the German invaded Paris. And of course, we were only one out of thousands of people starting to leave. Don't forget that if France had a bad experience with the Germans, that was the third war with them.
Can you tell us who were the 11 people in this car?
Were the people? I didn't get.
Who were the 11 people in the car?
In the car, we were 11 people, like I said. My uncle and his wife, which is my aunt, with her two teenage daughters, that's 4. Myself, my mother, that's 6. Another aunt with her son and daughter, and then a friend of my aunt with her nephew. That was 11 people. And they were all in the back of the truck, open truck. And since I was the youngest one, I had to sit in the front with my uncle and aunt.
What were you able to take with you?
Well, everybody had a few packages, not much. And the only thing I took with me were a few toys. I don't quite remember which toys it was, but I know that I took a few toys. That was my main request in a sense, is to take toys with me. But my parents probably took some blankets and some food.
Before we leave Paris, is there anything else you want to share with us about your days in Paris?
Well, I had a few friends, mostly when my parents visited France. They had children my age too. But I really didn't go to school. I was supposed to go to school because I was 6, 7 years old, so I was supposed to start, but I never made it in Paris. That's about all I can, in the good time I had in this restaurant with all the people that knew me, and like I say, I was a happy kid.
When you all got into this station wagon or into this vehicle, were you able to say goodbye to any of your neighbors, or was nobody supposed to know about it? Can you explain your departure a little bit?
Well, I don't think they were. I didn't. No, I don't think they said goodbye to anybody. Maybe they had before, the day before, something like, but I had nobody to say goodbye to. The only thing is my cousin, the teenagers, had a friend across the street, so maybe they said goodbye, but no, we just went into early morning into this truck and left.
Do you know what the plan was for this escape? Did anybody explain to you where you were going and what was going to happen?
No, nobody told me that we were leaving Paris because of the German coming. I just went into the truck, and for me it was new because at this time there were not that many cars or trucks, and I think maybe a taxi or two. I never rode in a car, you know, and I was too young to ride bicycles, so I mostly rode the subway, le métro, as they call it in French.
Can you take us step by step on this journey that you started? What happened?
So, like I said, we started early in the morning, and as we went, we were going south. That's what I was told, south of France. And as we were going, more and more people were on the way. When we started to leave Paris, already we had a lot of people walking on bicycle, on motorcycle, cars, and even horse-drawn carriages. So the fastest we could go was as fast as somebody walked, because they wouldn't let us pass them. They were walking on the street, on the road, and we were just following them. That's all we could. But as of course, as we went and went, people walking started to give up. So now you only had people bicycle, motorcycle, cars. So we went a little faster until the horse-drawn carriages left us too. This time we went a little faster. Well, I can tell you that while we were on this road, there were planes. I believe they were Italian planes that came with machine gun and bombs and whistling bombs. They came down and whistled, so everybody jumped from where they were and went into trees or went on the side of the road laying down. And I was laying next to my mother under a tree, and of course, we heard a bomb, the machine gun, nothing too near us, but we could hear them. And my mother was holding me, and she'd say, Henri, Henri, are you afraid? And I was shaking, and I said, no, Mom, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid, shaking. Okay, once this was finished, we went into the truck back again and started going south. So, of course, on going down, we could see car burning, we could see a few horses dead, we could see people laying on the side. For me, I mean, they tried to not to show me these things, but I could see them, but didn't make too much out of it. So that basically was our trip, but we made it. Along the way, it was getting dark, so my uncle saw a farm away from the road, so he went there with a truck and asked the people, if they could accommodate us for the night because it was getting dark. And these people were very nice, very nice. They say, look, we'll do what we can. Since I was the youngest, and they had a room available, my mother and I took this room, and everybody else went to the barn and slept in the barn the night. The next day, we woke up, we washed in the bassin what they had outside, and they gave us some food. They said, there was cheese, there was ham, there was, anything they could give us, and we left. Now I can also say that after a couple of hours, my uncle stopped the car in front of a city hall, and I asked him, why do we stop here? He said, I have no more gas. I have to stop. I have no more gas. So he went inside the city hall and talked to the mayor. Armand Mardon was his name, very nice man. And he told him, "Look, Monsieur," he didn't know his name. "Monsieur, where can I get some gas?" So the mayor told him, "Forget about gas. There's no gas available except for emergency. There's no gas." So, and second of all, probably he was aware because he was not only the mayor of the village, but like a senator here. So he knew what was going on, and he told my noncle, he probably saw that we were Jewish. He said, "You don't want to go back to Paris now. Stay here and I'll help you."
Could you please repeat the name of the mayor
From the where?
and maybe help me with the spelling?
Of the mayor?
Yes, please.
Mardon, M-A-R-D-O-N. Armand Mardon. Armand Mardon. Yeah, M-A-R-D-O-N. Armand, A-R-M-O-N-D. That was his first name. Mardon his last name. Later on, I can say later on, he was arrested by the Gestapo in 1944, sent to a camp in, I believe, Auschwitz, and also died there. Never came back, but he helped us.
And the name of this area, this town?
This village, it was a village of about 800 people at the time. It was situated close to the middle of France, at the south of the river Loire. Loire is a river in France that goes from east to west and separates France kind of two parts. As a matter of fact, that was later on the separation between the occupied and the free zone. The name of the village was Dun-le-Poilier, D-U-N-LE-P-O-E-L-I-E-R.
At this point in your experience, for you, what did you understand about why your family is traveling and why you should not go back to Paris? I mean, how much did you actually understand?
1940, I was 7 years old. You know, it was all new for me. I mean, I always lived in Paris, so it was all new for me to live, to be in a small village. Why was I there? I don't know. I don't know. The only thing is that I had a new life. I started school, which was new for me. Of course, the people didn't speak Yiddish. And one of the things that the mayor of the village told us, he said, "You don't speak Yiddish at all. You speak Polish because you are Polish immigrants. You speak Polish or French, but not a word of Yiddish." And you know, there's a lot of questions that comes later about that. You know, I maybe I'm going ahead of myself, but one of the questions that I still have is, other people did not know that we were Jewish, because as Polish Catholic in the village, we never attended the church. In a small village, you know, almost everybody goes to church, especially in France. They're all Catholic. We were the only, at the time we came, we were the only Jews there. Of course, apparently nobody knew, but nobody questioned. That's another question that I have, among others.
The mayor said he was going to help you. How did he help you?
Excuse me?
Besides giving you this advice,
Yes.
how did the mayor help you?
Yeah, well, the mayor was very good. I mean, not only did he give us this advice, but he gave us a small house. I'll come back to it. A small house, and eventually, not at the time we came there because we didn't have it, but eventually ration cards, because you had to have ration card to buy milk, to buy butter, to buy shoes, to buy anything. You need a ration card. So he had us this ration card, even so we were not, from the village. This house that we lived 11 years. I mean, 11 people for 4 years in that house. That house had 2 rooms, 2 rooms for 11 people. No running water, of course. What was I going to say? Only a stove to warm us up or to cook, small stove, and no bathroom. Now, don't ask me how we did everything. For me, I don't know. I only knew that I was taking bath in this big pot where they wash the clothes. So they were putting out water and they were taking bath there. But how everybody else did, I can't remember. There's things that for some reason I cannot remember.
Besides the mayor who helped you and the people in the town who did not question you, did anybody else help you?
Well, we were 11 people, like I said. My uncle, my cousin, who was 1920, and his sister, who was a few years younger, and my teenage cousin. They all worked at jobs. I mean, they work in farms, which was good because, first of all, we had a little money, not much, but a little money. But mainly, they brought back food. A chicken here, a rabbit here, potatoes, carrots, from the farm. So that was good in a sense. So I cannot say that we were missing, even though we had cards, ration card would give you the minimum, we were not missing food. So yeah. Up to now, I never mentioned my father. My father was not with us. My father went into the French army. They had a French army. It's not the Foreign Legion, but it was mainly foreigners. Foreigners because they didn't speak any French. So they went in the army. And of course, since France lasted, a few weeks, a few months against the German, he was liberated and joined us. Another question is, how did they know where we were? He was in the army, liberated, Paris, but he found us. How? I wish I could ask him. Another of this question. So after that, he came with us, and in this village, he became I forgot the name. Cutting trees. He was cutting trees. What is the name is? Come back. So he was cutting trees, and that was his job in the village. Bûcheron in French. Bûcheron is wood. Okay. He'll be back. The word will be back. So at this, well, I have spoken yet what happened to us there. Shall I start now? Okay, so what happened is that this village toward the 42, 43, mainly 43, was very partisan. They had a lot of partisan, fighting the German. We didn't have, let me go back a little. France was divided in two. The Loire River that I mentioned before was the separation. The north was German occupied. The south was under French control, but French control was Philippe Pétain and Laval and some other, which turned out to be worse than the German for the Jews. They made some new rules, what to do with the Jews, and they arrested Jews as often as the German would. As a matter of fact, I'm French, and it hurts me. The roundup of Veldiv that happened in Paris was done by the French, wasn't done by the German. It was done by the French. French had ready, they had buses, they had everything, and everybody participated. Nobody went against it. And I'm not going to go into what the Veldiv, what happened there. But in our part, the south of France, which was under French control, once in a while, German would cross to go to the west coast to go. So they came to the village, and the partisan used to fight them. But of course, they would last 15, 20 minutes and run away because they couldn't fight the German. So what happened after a fight, the German or the French police would go around, and anybody they would see in the fields or what were arrested as hostage, because if a German was killed, they would kill hostage. If the German was not killed, they would arrest them, but they would release them. So my uncle and my cousin Simon, my uncle was Jules Ratz, and my cousin was Simon Langer, were arrested together with other people, but they found out that they were Jewish. And my cousin was sent to Gurs in south of France, which was a little like Drancy near Paris, where they put prisoners, and from there they would send them to Germany, to Auschwitz or other camp. My cousin was not French, he was Polish. But my uncle was French citizen. So I guess they kept him with another Jew who was also a French citizen, and they took them in a car, and near a forest, they told them they were free. So they're starting to walk away, and these two collaborators, they were French, shot them in the back of the head. How do we know that? It's because the owner of the estate there, who has a castle and everything, happened to be a few hundred meters away, and he saw the whole thing. As a matter of fact, he took care of the two bodies and put crosses where he put them. Later on, when my aunt found out, she went to him and she said, well, they were Jewish. And the guy said, oh, I'm sorry, I put crosses, I didn't know. He didn't know, he was sorry that he put crosses on them. So my uncle eventually, body was moved to a cemetery near Paris.
Can you give us your uncle's name?
My uncle's name was Jules, Jules, Ratz, R-A-T-Z. He has his name etched on the monument or on the stele in the village where they have all the people that died for the village. His name is on it. I tried to put my mother and my cousin's name, but there's so much red tape that I had to give up. I had to go through Paris, to the Minister of Defense, to the Minister of Soldier, whatever, and they just couldn't do it because they just didn't want to do it. So my uncle's name is the only one there. Now, coming back, we'll talk to my mother about my mother. My mother was with us. For some reason, again, another question, maybe my father knew, but I didn't know, and I still don't know. She wanted to go back to Paris. So she went back to Paris and then was arrested, went to Drancy, from Drancy to Auschwitz, and for Auschwitz, that was the end. As a matter of fact,
When was this?
what?
I'm sorry, can you tell me what time frame did she go back to Paris?
I don't know why. We don't know why. The only thing is that we had a cousin in Paris, and he told us what happened. As a matter of fact, this cousin also lost his wife and his child. He lost his, but he said he tried to get her out of Drancy because he knew the head of the police there. But the policeman told him there's nothing he can do. There's nothing.
When was this?
This was in 1943. 1943. So, last I saw my mother was what, 7, 8 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 1943. But again, I don't know. For some reason, some difficult time, I forget. I cannot remember my mother. And I was 10 years old. And only a few instances where before the war where she sent me to summer camps with other children that I saw a few times. I remember that. But, I feel so sorry that I cannot remember her. But
when you were in this village it seems like you were there for many years.
4 years.
What were your days like? What did you do during the day and during those weeks and months and years?
Well, I was there. We were there for 4 years, from 40 to 44. I started school. I liked school. That was something new for me, and made a lot of friends. Of course, it was a small village, so there was only one class for boys and one class for girls in another school. I know that after school, in front of the school, there was a little yard, and we used to play there. But my parents used to come and get me because they didn't feel safe that I stood there after, by myself after school. They knew what was going on, I guess, and they always wanted me to come, and I didn't want to go because I was playing with my friends. Weekends, we went fishing, we went swimming in the summer. I mean, again, for me, it was a good life, a new life, a good life, because I didn't miss Paris. I mean, certainly not miss Paris. I had nothing in Paris really to miss for me. So the only thing that happened in that village is one day toward 1943-44, Germans were crossing the village to go to the west coast because now the Allied were there fighting, so they sent all the troops there, and on their way they were attacked by the partisans, the French partisans, and of course, There were only a few French partisans, but there were hundreds of soldiers, German soldiers with tanks and everything on trucks, and they attacked them. So the Germans stopped and surrounded the village, burned a few farms, and as far as I was told, they wanted to erase the village. That means they put the mortar all around and they started shooting the village in order to destroy it completely. But about 2 or 3 hours into the fight, they decided to stop. Why? I think somebody told me that someone from the Red Cross talked to the German in charge, and they decided to leave. So, but meanwhile, you know, some houses, some farms were destroyed. So they left. So we almost, that's got away because we would have been, most of us would have been killed. It was a little like Oradour-sur-Glane, which is a village in French, which was entirely burned with its people in the church. People were burned in the church. Oradour-sur-Glane is still the way it was after it was burned. So now, what happened is that, of course, we didn't know what was going on really. I mean, you know, there was only one newspaper, and it was under the control of Vichy. Vichy collaborated with the German. We were not supposed to have radio. Of course, no television. And once a month, you know, someone would come around with films, and the documentary would show always the German winning, you know, good for the German, even so it was the kind of, but we weren't supposed to have radio, but some people had them. So toward the end of the war, they were listening to Radio London. From London, General de Gaulle used to speak to the French speaks to the French. And from him, we knew what was going on. So that was about the only news that we got. Is that, of course, you know, we wanted to, if you were caught listening to the radio, you could be just taken away. And us children, they ask us to play outside. And if we see someone that we don't know coming, just tell them so they can hide the radio. That was my biggest job.
Excuse me, we have to take a break for just a minute.
Okay.
Just 1 minute. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. You were talking about how, I guess the children in the area would warn people when the Germans were approaching. That's what you were talking about when we had to take a break. Can you please resume and tell us what happened?
On what?
You were saying that part of your responsibility, your job as a child.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, we were playing in front of the house, and like I said, if we happen to see someone that we didn't know, to let them know, because it could have been the Gestapo, could have been a collaborator, could have been the gendarme. So, you know, if they were caught listening to the radio, especially Radio London, that was the end of them. So that was our main, once in a while, you know, we changed, or I went inside and I listened. It's funny because at the time, you know, London used to send these messages, which were funny for me, like the bird needs to drink. Now that meant something to some group, that either they had to fight or they were receiving arms, or the frog is jumping into the water, you know, things like that. That's some meaning to the resistance in France. but for me it was funny. So
How much did you know during the war about what was happening to Jews elsewhere in Europe?
while in the village, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even know that I was in danger. You know, it's only when my uncle and my cousin were killed and my mother didn't come back that I had a feeling that something was wrong. But I really, we didn't really know the extent of what was going on, or at least I didn't know the extent of what's going on. Besides us 11, there were some other Jews that came later in the village. Another one that I know, he was also a friend of my father, also was arrested and went to Auschwitz, never came back. The rest of us still alive. I mean, at the time, because now everybody is gone.
Two things. One, I want to get your cousin's name. I got your uncle's name that was killed, but your cousin who was killed, what was his name?
Simon, Simon, Langer, Langer.
All right. And also, you said other Jews had come to the area later.
Yeah.
Were there any arrests of Jews, or did you see any close calls where people were almost arrested during your time in this village, or were the Jews pretty much safe there?
I would say pretty much safe. The question is since my uncle and cousin and this friend were arrested and found out that they were Jews, they didn't follow through and come to the village and look for the family or whatever, because they were Jews, so they didn't come by themselves. They probably had family, but well, my reasoning is that I think it's because there was a lot of resistance in the village, and people were afraid to denounce it. Probably, that's my point of view. That they must have been afraid to denounce it because, of course, they didn't have too much to gain. It's not like in Paris or in big city where you told your neighbor was Jewish, so they would arrest your neighbor, and then the apartment, everything in the apartment was yours. They had everything to gain. In the village, they had nothing to gain. I mean, who wanted to live in the house that we were living in? It was an old house, 2-room. The house must have been about 400 years old. So they had nothing to gain, and we didn't take any silver or anything with us. So I mean, I can talk for my parents because they knew more than I do, but I felt kind of, quote, safe. I never felt that, never did I hear one of my friends telling me that I was Jew or sale juif or whatever it is. I never heard. Like I said, I don't even know if they knew that I was Jew. I have to tell this story. This was already after the war. I went to high school. And we were in the recess in the yard, and we were talking, and one of my friend came running to us, and he said, "Hey, listen, there's a new student. He's Jewish." So everybody say, "He's Jewish. Let's see what he looks like." So I say, "Hey, stop! I'm Jewish too." I think they almost fell on the ground. They had no idea what a Jew was. I was surprised myself because I told them, I never hinted or never said I never had the occasion of saying that I was Jewish. That was another small town for my school. So, but when I told them, they looked at me like I came from outer space. So, so now this could explain anti-Semitism. Most of them don't even know what a Jew is. It's just part of their life. I had to tell the story.
When did you realize the Germans were losing the war?
That was
When did you start to realize that the Germans were losing the war?
well, like I said, we were listening. I mean, they were listening to the radio, so the radio would tell them that the American were there, and then we had planes, American planes, flying over the village, and so we had a feeling that something, at least I had the feeling that something was going on. That something was going on, and winning or losing, I didn't know exactly if they were winning or losing, but I knew something was going on with the American and other people.
Is there anything else that you want to share with us about your time in this village during the war years? Anything that you haven't shared with us that you'd like us to know?
Well, I went to this village after the war. I mean, way after the war. Uh, maybe I'm getting because my wife, which I met here in the United States, is French. Was French too, and she lived, maybe 20 minutes from where I was hiding, which we of course we didn't know, and so when I visited France after the war in the 1970s, 80s, we went to where she lived. It was not far from the village, so we went a few times to the village, and I made a few friends there, or at least they remember me, like the butcher's son, and another one that moved out of the village. A couple of people that I kept in touch with. Unfortunately, the butcher's son died young. The other one moved outside the village, but I kept in touch with. As a matter of fact, I keep in touch with his wife now because he passed away. So we emailed, things here and there. So that's about. I mean, I cannot remember anything bad about the village, of course, except that some of my family passed away, they died, were arrested, but I cannot say anything special about the village. I mean, I must say I was, beside that, pretty lucky. We were pretty lucky as far as our 4 years during the occupation.
You used the word hiding a minute ago, and I wanted to ask about that. Were you hiding in the sense that you had a different name or that you did anything to hide the fact that you were Jewish?
We, no, we didn't have a different name. I think my cousins had different names. I don't remember what they were. I think they had different names. But in school, I had my name, the name I had. When my father came, and we knew that the Germans were going around the village looking for people, or even the French people looking for people, not especially Jews, but for hostages are there. My father used to hide in a small attic. I mean, very small attic, like like it would help him, I mean, if they were looking in the house, they would probably first place they would look is the attic because they would know that's the only place to hide in a two-room apartment, a two-room house. So this is about, of course, whenever there was a resistance raid or fight or something like that, we stood home. We didn't go outside, except those who were taken because they were walking in the field.
How did you learn the war in Europe was over?
Well, my uncle was a lieutenant in the resistance, but in a different village about a couple hundred miles from where we were. And he came. Again, question, how did you know where we were? He knew. I didn't know my mother was not with us. So he came. So I realized that we were traveling freely now. And of course, he asked my father if I wanted to go with him, with his wife. His wife was my mother's sister, and he had two daughters. So if I wanted to go and live with her, for a few years until I become older. So my father said yes. So he took me there, and at this time, there was no German, there was no milice, there was no people were not hiding anymore. So that's about when I realized at this time I was 11 years old. I realized that something different happened. I mean, let's face it, at the time, young people, kids like me, we didn't have television, we didn't have all these things that you see now, so we were a little, shall I say, backwards, maybe, not up to date.
Can you please tell us the name of this uncle and your uncle and aunt and your cousins? What were their names?
Yeah, my uncle name was Leon, Leon, Meyerowitz, Meyerowitch. And my aunt was Helen Meyerowitz, Helen. He was a soldier. So before the war, he went to Vietnam, which was in the China at the time, Africa as a soldier, and then he came back to France just before the war. He had two daughters, and in a small village, there was about 100 people. So I went there, and I finished primary school.
Can you give us their names, your cousins?
What?
Can you tell us your cousins' names?
My cousin, one was Jacqueline, Jacqueline, and the other one was Liliane, Liane, also Meyerowitz. She was 1 year younger than me, but Jacqueline was, I think, 8 years older. So she was already 18, 19 years old.
And you went to live with them?
And you what?
You went to live with them?
Yeah, I went to live with them. I finished primary school there in the village. They had one school, like Little House on the Prairie, where they had all the grade in one room because they had 100 people in the village. From there, I went to high school. That was about 5 miles away. So we went there by bicycle. We didn't have car, we didn't have anything. So that was high school, 5 years, kilometers from the village. I spent 4 years there, graduated from high school. So I was already, I was 49, was already 16 years old. At the time, I went back to Paris with my father. So I went back to Paris, I was 17 years old.
Okay, before we go back to Paris, can you give us the name of the village that you were living in with your cousins?
Serez, Serez.
Thank you. How long did it take for you or your family to find out what happened to your mother and to the family that had been left behind in Poland and anybody else that fell during the war, was killed during the war?
We learned from my mother, from my cousin that was in France, who, like I said, has lost his wife and his son. So we learned from him that she was arrested. And later on, through documents, we found out where she was sent and where she was killed. From the family in Poland, we never heard anything else, never, except for one of my mother's sister. She was hidden in a nunnery. She was very sick. She was hidden by the nuns in Poland, and one of her sister, one of my aunt, had some correspondence with her, when sending her some money and some medication, and then we never heard again from her. So from the people in Poland, we really don't know what happened. I'm trying to find out through the internet, but I cannot find anything.
Is there anything else you want to share with us about your time before you went back to Paris? When you were living with your uncle, or anything else that you want to share? Were you able to stay in touch with your father while you were living with your uncle?
My father went back to Paris, after everybody left the village down Poilier after the war. My father went to Paris we had the same apartment. He found the same apartment, which was really a one-room apartment with a small kitchen. So that was the apartment we had in Paris. The cafe, the restaurant was closed because my uncle was not there anymore, and they never went back to it. So my father became a house painter, and when I went back, then we moved into a new apartment, also in Paris, that has already 2 rooms and a kitchen and running water, because the other one didn't have running water. No, they had water, but didn't have bathrooms. So we moved to an apartment, also didn't have bathroom, but running water and a little bigger. And I started working. I got a job in Paris with Shoham. Shoham were in the same building as El Al. Shoham was the ship company that went from Marseille to Israel. So I was working for them. El Al, of course, was the airline company. They were in the same building. So I worked there for 2 years. Then I left and worked for a garment garment center making sweaters. He was making sweater, and then I went with a friend. We had our little shop where we're making sweaters too. That was before I came to the United States.
So when did you come to the United States?
I went to the French Army for 2 years. While in the French Army, I applied for the visa, and it took over a year for me to get the visa. I came to the United States in 58. In 58, like my father said, you go there, if you like it, I come, if you don't like it, you come back. So I came here to the United States. I was living with my uncle, and made a few friends and got a job. So after that, I found out that it wasn't bad at all, more than I had in France. So I told my father, come, sell everything and come. I'm staying here. And that's why he came. As a matter of fact, my father married my mother's sister, who also had lost her husband. The son came with us to the village. He was in the village too. So after the war, of course, he married her, and they both came to the United States. I had already, excuse me, I had my uncle's two daughters were already in the United States. They had left France before.
The name of the aunt that your father married, what was her name?
The what?
The woman that your father married, what was her name?
Sarah, Sarah, Langer, Langer. So he married her. And she had,
Before you,
what? I'm sorry. She had,
no,
what?
Go ahead, sir.
She had the daughter then in the village, and the son, who was also deported and killed, went to Gurs, Simon. And her husband disappeared just before we left. And we never, at least I never knew, or I never knew what happened to him. So he never came back. So we assume he passed away. How? I don't know.
I wanted to ask you, before you came to the United States, what your expectations were of America, and then also what your first impressions were of
My
America.
expectation in the United States, or?
Yes, of the United States.
Well, I came here because my father liked it. And most of my family now was in the United States. The few that survived also left before me. My cousins, my father's brother, he had one brother who had two children here, and he had a lot of cousins here. So in France, we only have one cousin, a faraway cousin, that I met a couple of times. So we really didn't have anybody left in France. So that was the reason. And then I just started a business, but nothing special. So I figure maybe I can do better in the United States. And I left. Went to school, as a matter of fact. There, I got a BA in 1970. That was what, 37 years later. At 37, I got my BA from Brooklyn College, and was working in a brokerage house, E.F. Hutton, and different places after that. What?
When you came to America, I wanted to know how you were treated by the American people and if they asked you about your life during the war in France. Did anybody ask you?
Well, most of the friends that I made in the United States after I came were also Jewish, and most of them were French. So we didn't question out. The only other things is that when I had my job at E.F. Hutton, which was a brokerage house, which disappeared since then, a brokerage house, and I told my friend that was in early 1960, and I told my friend I got a job in the E.F. Hutton. They asked me, what is it? I said, it's brokerage house. They look at me and they say, you were hired? I say, of course I was hired. I said, because at the time, even in the 1960s, they didn't go for too much for Jewish people. Banks and brokerage houses were not hiring Jewish people. That's why a lot of firms are Jewish, because you don't hire me, I'll do my own. So they were a little surprised that I was hired, and I say, well, I don't know, they didn't ask me. You know, I was new in the country, so I didn't know about that.
In addition to what you just told us about some of these places not hiring Jews, did you experience anti-Semitism in the United States?
I must say no. No. Of course, I feel when I see what's going on, I feel it. But personally, I must say no. Nobody really treated me as, tell me a dirty Jew or whatever. No, as a matter of fact, no. I must say my wife was not Jewish. She converted. Not that I didn't ask her, she wanted to. And as a matter of fact, once we were married, she wanted a kosher home, which I never had before. She wanted a kosher home. She wanted to go to the synagogue, to the shul. She went every Saturday, every Friday night, until she didn't give up, but she couldn't follow through because none of my children, I had 4 children and myself, were really following her. So she did on her own. So that's about the most Jewish life I had.
You mentioned your children. What did you tell your children and any grandchildren about your wartime experiences?
It's it's funny. I mein, funny not in the sense laughable, but it's funny. It's that my father, my family, and even my cousin who married a survivor, never spoke about the experience during the war until my father never, because he passed away in 1980. But after that, I started more or less to be involved especially in Florida. That's like 10 years ago, where I really got involved. I went to the the Holocaust Museum of Greater Orlando, and they had, of course, the Kristallnacht, and they had the lighting of candles and things like that, and they got me involved because I was a survivor. So that's when I started. Then they asked me if I wanted to speak in front of people. So I made a tape at the museum of Holocaust Museum. I spoke in front of the U.S. Army at UCF, University of Central Florida. I spoke to the French Army, to the U.S. Army. I spoke a few times in a Catholic school, which made me feel good because, you know, speaking in a yeshiva, you're talking to people that's supposed to know. But when you talk to a Catholic school, this is new. They had no idea, or they have a small idea of what was going on. So I felt always better to speak in a Catholic school than in a Jewish school, in a yeshiva. So that's when I really get involved. And now, of course, I don't travel that much. I'm speaking in front of for sometimes. I was interviewed by also by yeshiva in Westchester, New York. We went television also, but that's what I got involved in. That's what I felt that really, even so, I cannot speak about camps. I cannot speak about hardship really. You know, I have to tell them what I know. I have to tell them what I know.
What was it like for you, given your life experience, to see the refugees coming out of Ukraine not so very long ago?
Well, you know, I'm looking the news too, and of course, you know, that I like it or not, see this refugee going on in Israel too now, and you know, maybe not to the same extent, but it brings back memories. I was part of it. I was part of it. You see people bleeding, you see people killed, you see people and I was part of it. I never bled or never was wounded or anything, but I was part of it. So it brings back the memory, and I feel really sorry. You know, we thought this will never happen again, and I feel terrible when I see these things. You know, even so, I may not, I wouldn't say like, but I wouldn't, you know, the other side. I mean, I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to exaggerate. You know, I just feel sorry for what's going on, one way or the other.
Is there anything we have not yet talked about that you would like to mention before we finish the interview?
I think you know, of course, no, I don't know. I think I'd said most of what I had to say. Most of what to say. I will repeat. I was not one of the that can give a story of what happened in Auschwitz or what happened in the other camp or what happened. You know, I can only speak about what I read, what I was told by people, because I in the United States I have another cousin, a woman who went to camp, and she was a patient of Dr. Mengele, and she was here. She was fairly young here, and she was always sick, and she died pretty young. You know, that's so. This is the experience, first-hand experience that I had without being in a camp. First of all, if I had gone into a camp in 1942, 43, I was 11 years old, I wouldn't be here today, because not too many children at this age or younger survived. They were directly sent to the gas chamber, directly with with the old people and babies and directly. So we I don't know. I don't know how to phrase that. We were sent to the gas chamber, young, old. I mean, the oldest was, I think, 101 years old. I have it in the book. The youngest were babies. Uh, we saw on television now, always showing babies being hurt and all these things. And I say, this happened to us. This happened to us. So it's not that I don't feel bad about it, but it happened to us. So at that time, they didn't mention it. Nobody mentioned what was going on to the Jews to the extent of now. Of course, they didn't have television, but nobody spoke to the extent that 6 million people were killed. You talk about, 10,000 people killed, which is 10,000 too many, but it's not 6 million. Okay, I don't want to expand because, it's hard for me to stay on my side saying what's going on. I can't, it's sad, but let's hope it's going to finish soon.
Can you please share the name of the cousin that you mentioned, the one who was with Mengele? What was the cousin's name?
I don't remember. I don't remember her name.
That's okay. What message do you have for future viewers who will watch this interview in 50 years or 100 years from now?
I like to see their faces when they learn of what's going on 100 years ago. 6 million Jews, not counting the 50 or 60 millions other people that were killed in that war. Never again is the motto. In French, it's plus jamais, but unfortunately, never again seems to happen again. So it's sad. Never again. One thing that I would suggest, if you have the chance of having, I would say, any more parents or grandparents that survived, that are survivors, ask question. Ask question. I'm glad that my kids are asking also questions, but I cannot answer them because you saw that there's a lot of unanswered questions because I didn't ask. I didn't ask my parents, I didn't ask my family what happened. So this question is over. One question that I like to know, two questions. One was, why was my mother went back to Paris, and how did my father find us when he was liberated? I don't know. It's it works in me every time that I do this. This question comes, and I try to find an answer. So never again. Make sure that this never happens again. Plus jamais.
Thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Well, like I say, I cannot say it's my pleasure because it's never a pleasure to talk about that, but I'm glad to have said what I had to say.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Can you tell us about this book?
This book is the memorial of the French people deported by Serge Clarfield. It has the name in it of my mother, her birth date, and where she went, and when she was killed. It has or at least most of the name of the French and Belgium citizen that were deported from France in Belgium. That's about 70,000 names. It also has a little history of the what convoy number and what happened and how many came back.
Thank you. And who is this, please?
This is the picture of my mother. I believe this picture was taken in Poland, and I have the original in my house in Brooklyn, New York. So
First and last name?
Kosowska. Kosowska. Hanna Kosowska was her name.
Any idea when the picture was taken?
Oh, I would say probably late 1920s.
Thank you. And please tell us about this photo.
This photo is a picture of my father, Bert Goodheim, and myself, Henry Goodheim, taken in front of a direction indicator in the village where we were hiding. Must have been around 1942.
And the name of the village, please?
The village where we were hiding was Dun-le-Poilier.
In what country?
That was in France. In France.
Thank you. Who are these people?
These people are my uncle, Jules Ratz, R-A-T-Z, and his wife, Sirla Ratz, taken where we were living in the same village in Dun-le-Poilier in France in must have been 1942.
Thank you.
2.
And who are these people, please?
These people is on the left is my cousin Simon Langer, who was arrested and deported to Gurs, then to Auschwitz. In the middle is my aunt Sarah Langer, who eventually became my father's wife, who had lost her husband. And to the right is her daughter, Monique Maria. She was called Maria, but in the village they called her Monique Langer. She survived and came also to the United States. And it's taken in the village where we were hiding, in Dun-le-Poilier, France, in 1942.
Thank you. Please tell us about this.
Well, this is a star, and since we were French, in the middle it says Juif in French, and you can see that the word Juif is done with letters that resemble the Yiddish alphabet. Now, how did I get this? I don't know, because we never wore one in the village. But my father found it in the apartment when he came back to Paris. So I presume that my mother had them when she went back to Paris and left them in the apartment. So that's where we found them.
And that's an actual star that...
Yeah, it's a real star. I mean, it's the actual star.
Thank you.
I have another one, but the other one is it's been folded. So it just showed the star and the Juif, not the surrounding. It's been, because most of the Jewish people are tailors or things like that. So they even so, it's the star. They wanted to look good, so they made it a little better looking.
Thank
Jewish
you.
are like that.
2.
What are we looking at now?
we're looking at a postcard that was sent by my cousin Simon Langer on his way to Gurs, south of French, while he was arrested. He wrote it in the train, and I have two postcards from him in 2 different days, which means it took several days for him to go from the village to Gurs, where from there was sent to Auschwitz. So this is the postcard sent to his mother, saying in the postcard, he said everything is okay. They were nourished by the people on the way, giving them food. So they really had no idea what was going to happen to them.
Sorry, we cannot hear you.
Do you know when the postcard was sent? When was this postcard sent?
I would have to look at the poster, but probably also 1943.
Thank you. What are we looking at now?
We're looking at a book called Un Canton dans la Tourmente, a French book written by an historian who lived not far from the village. And in this is tell what happened during the war period in this village or in the surrounding. And on the left page, I have the name of my family. Those who
Could you repeat the name?
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear you. Can you please repeat the name of the book and translate it?
I would have to look at it. The name one is Jablonski Herman, who was a friend of us, lived in the village, 1943. The other one was Langer Simon, which is my cousin, also it says 1941 here. And the other one is Rat Julian, my uncle, and it says 1943. These three were arrested as hostage, and 2 were deported to Auschwitz, and 1 was killed. My uncle was killed.
And I'm sorry, the name of the book, could you repeat the name and translate what it means?
A canton is a county in trouble. And it was written by, I don't remember the name, but by an historian who lived not from the village. As a matter of fact, I had the chance to see him. He dedicated the book to me.
Thank you.
2.
And what are we looking at here?
We're looking at the house where we lived for 4 years. And as you can see, it's a 400 years old house. In front of the house, it's Henri Goodheim, myself. That was taken, I think, about 1990, sometime around 1990. I went back there, so I tried to go in, but they didn't answer. So I couldn't go in the house. And the second time I went there, it looks like nobody was living there anymore. So I never went inside since we left the village.
And the name of the village, please?
Dans le Poilier. D-U-N.
Thank you.
L-E-P-O-E-L-I-E-R. Okay, what's the last one?
And please tell us about this photo.
Well, this is Henri Goodheim, myself, in front of a stone where my mother's name is etched. This is the only place where my mother's name shows, because we, of course, in Auschwitz, we don't know what happened anymore. I mean, no body, nothing. It's taken in Shipshead Bay in Brooklyn, where they have a Holocaust memorial, and they have a lot of stones there with all the names. And my cousin's name is on another stone. Simon Langer is also there on another stone. since that's the only place where their name shows.
Thank you very much. And this now concludes the interview.
Thank you. Bye-bye.